coming, his head is out. And I pushed and he came out. So then I got him in my hands and we got him out of the water. But so the boys were in the room for when he came earthside, that was all I had wanted. Like, I just wanted them to witness some part of it. They don't remember that part, but I do, that they were there for that. So that was pretty amazing.
I had my children on the floor. I was on my favourite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realised in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women.
Like, I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, Shiva, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, or welcome back, shall I say.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be back.
It's so great to have you back, seeing your beautiful face. I get transported back to your previous story. That I can't remember exactly the title, maybe you can, but it was something about like mantra guiding you through your birth, yeah?
Exactly. Moving through the waves with mantra, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I remember really loving your story, so I'm excited to hear about your third birth story that we're going to dive on into today. And you just said before we started recording that your episode was 3 years ago, 4 years ago? I mean,
almost, yeah. June of 22. Yeah. June 2022.
We're coming up to almost 4 years this
4
year.
years, yes.
That is also like insane. And it's just, I mean, I love having repeat podcast guests. It's so fabulous.
Yes.
The max has been 4, I think, birth stories, which is amazing, and anything in between.
Yes.
And that's just so great. Have you been listening to the podcast at all during this time?
I have, yes, and it's been so wonderful. Of course, I had my favorites that I went back to, especially when I was getting ready to give birth again. But yes, I've been listening since, and it's interesting to see the things that are the same and the things that are different. And it's been such a touchstone for me, and trying to make meaning of what birth is also in the in-between when I'm not giving birth or planning to. What does birth mean to me in those times as well? So I think that's going to be evolving. And for that reason, I look forward to always listening to you to see what birth means and what it does in my life in the in-between as well.
Yeah, birth really teaches you about life.
It does. Yeah,
and about,
absolutely.
just living life just as you're birthing, in a sense of like, life is the great mystery, just like birth is. And I see so much wisdom. I learn so much from birth, just being in the birth portal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's beautiful.
So take us back to becoming pregnant. So this third baby, was that planned?
Kind of. I have my stepson, who's about to turn 10 in a couple of weeks. And then we have my first son who's about to be 6, and the other one who's about to be 4. So we were kind of at max capacity, we believed, but there was a feeling of incompleteness for me. And then my husband was kind of saying, wow, really? You still feel incomplete? But I remember one time we were on a road trip and he talked about having another child and his eyes filled with tears. It only happened once, but that was enough for me, that he was able to kind of connect to a feeling of grief of not having another child, that he was able to connect to whatever soul or whatever potential was out there. So we had that, and then we started kind of saying, okay, let's start thinking about when we might do this and how we're going to do this. And then I had appendicitis and had to have an appendectomy. right around the time that we were going to start trying, which was really frightening. You know, being a person who values birthing out of the hospital, I had never had a procedure in a hospital before. So that was rather traumatic, just in terms of adjusting my expectations about health and my expectations about, you know, what the next 40, 50 years will look like health-wise. So that happened, and then I just felt, you know, I don't want anything expanding my belly for this period of time. So that delayed it a bit. And then we started, it was about 6 months out from that, and we were talking about how everybody's birthday is in the spring and mine is around Christmas, and I would love to have someone who was kind of towards that time of the year. And so we started trying around February, March. And I kept telling him, you know, oh, I'm almost 40. This isn't going to happen. And he, of course, said, no, I think it's going to happen. And so we got pregnant. And yeah, the first couple of months, I think there was a little bit of incredulousness for both of us of like, okay, we did it. We committed. This is actually going to happen. In fact, my favorite part of the beginning of this was I took a pregnancy test because I was a day late, which was unusual for me, but could have been anything, could have been stress. So I took the test and there was a very faint line. So I FaceTimed my aunt and was like, hey, do you see a second line here? And she said, yeah, I do. What is that, a COVID test? I said, it's a pregnancy test. And she was floored just because in our family, people don't tend to have more than, you know, 2 children or so. And so it was shocking and we had a good laugh over it. And then, yeah, just kind of telling our friends, there was this interesting feeling of, I don't know if it's because the economy or the world is crazy, but like really you're gonna have 4 kids and your reasons are not religious, your reasons are not cultural, you're just choosing to have 4 kids right now. So I remember being a little bit it was an interesting, not like, oh my gosh, we're having another baby. It was more like, yes, so we're doing this thing and it's really exciting. It was just a different feeling, I guess, sharing this with the world. And I remember telling my mom, of course, wants me to have a million children. So she was over the moon crying and all of this. My dad was more of the camp of like, well, you know, this means you've got to hunker down now. You've got to make this marriage work no matter what, was his kind of belief, which is an interesting reaction. And then Ted's mom, my husband's mom, I remember she had us on speakerphone when we told her. She was in the kitchen doing stuff and she goes, "What?" And there was an immediate like fall back to college. Hey, mom, I got pregnant feeling that came from that. But for her, I think the main reason was she's our main support, like through having all our children. She comes out and she stays for a couple of weeks and washes all the laundry, cleans up all the blood, takes care of all. So she's intimately involved in the process with us. So me being pregnant means that she's, you know, going to be called on in another way. So that was interesting, but it's by and large, it was a really beautiful kind of like opening into what we viewed as our last pregnancy together. Ted obviously had a child before, so I didn't get to have those firsts with him. But in my mind, I was always saying, well, we're going to get to have a last one, kind of in the twilight of these childbearing years, because we're in our 40s now. And yeah, it did feel that way, kind of this blossoming into, oh, this is potentially our last experience of doing this together. So that was really interesting and special, different from the other pregnancies. I also felt a lot sicker than I did in the other ones. And so for a while, we thought for sure this was a girl because I was always nauseated in the first 2, but this one was kind of next level, all encompassing and really impacted work, which why do I need to be working while I'm pregnant, right? That's a whole other thing. But like I wished I could just marinate in the experience instead, but definitely had to continue working and the hustle and bustle with all the kids, and the exhaustion was next level. So everything that wasn't absolutely essential for survival fell on the wayside. And we thought this must be a girl. And it wasn't. So we were looking at being parents of 4 boys, which was like, wow. Um, and I remember when I found out that it was a boy, I had this relief that I didn't expect to feel. And I interrogated myself a little bit, like, what's that about? What's this relief that you're feeling? And on one hand, it's okay, we already have 3 boys. I kind of know what the milestones are to look for and what my role is, and in certain respects. But the other part was I wanted my birth to go so perfectly because I wanted to be able to bring my daughter into an understanding of like birth at home is safe. Birth is fundamentally safe. And I wanted to give her this epic story. And I didn't know that I would be able to. So when I realized that I had a boy, I was like, well, okay, whatever happens, I'm okay with it because I don't have to make sure that this is a perfect story for a girl. And I know that that's kind of a silly feeling, but that was genuinely the feeling that I had. So I owned that. And then, yeah, so what was interesting was we walked through the first trimester in that way. And then in second trimester, the 12-day war started over between Iran and Israel, where I have family in both countries. And it was very upsetting. And I just felt myself being so stressed out. And all my aunts in Iran, one by one, were trying to find ways to contact me to say, please, Shiva, don't be worried. You're pregnant. You have to stay calm, like all of this. So that was a uniquely kind of painful time. And then the war ended, the 12-day war. And 2 days later, we got a call that Ted's father was taking a turn for the worse. So Ted flew out to be with his dad. And 3 days after he arrived there, his father passed away. So it was very sudden. And it was interesting because Ted, he wasn't very close with his father throughout his life. And so that kind of complicates, grief is complicated anyway, right? And it's heavy and walks with you for the rest of your life. And the things that were unsaid, the things that were never done, the things that were never understood, and the stories that were never told, that's, I don't know, that's another type of a grief, I think. And so that's what he walked into at that time. And that was, it was also hard because my 2 youngers were, because I can't have my stepson when my husband isn't here in terms of the agreements. So we didn't get to see my stepson during that time. And the younger 2 were very, that was their first brush of death with a human besides losing our dog. So that was kind of interesting how each of them were kind of, how much is a 3-year-old going to understand? How much is a 5-year-old going to understand? But they, they would be listening to a song and would say, oh, this song is about going over into the stars to a place where we can't follow. That must be about Poppy. So it was just incredible to kind of be having this life inside of me and then dealing with war and death and explaining death to really young ones. It was heavy. It was a very heavy time, and I'm pregnant. So it's just with the surge of emotions that naturally exist, it was a lot. And then my husband and I also confronted kind of an aspect of our relationship that had been weighing on me for, like 7 years. And I was kind of saying, this thing, I need you to change on this. And so that was kind of a big conversation that also, hey, we're about to have 4 boys. So I need us to be on the same page about this part of our life. And so that was also a lot altogether, and brought me to the middle of my second trimester, where it wasn't surprising that I was having a lot of somatic symptoms. So I had a hernia, like an umbilical hernia. And so it was excruciating pain, just like existing, because I could feel everything separating and all the nerves kind of. It was a terrible sensation. And then the other piece was kind of the exhaustion was continuing. So I just felt very incapacitated in this pregnancy, like physically, which was a new experience because the other two pregnancies were extremely easy. And I had the privilege of just being like, oh, I love being pregnant type thing. But this time it was extremely hard and impacted work and impacted my bandwidth with parenting, impacted my ability to keep the house clean, like all of the things, like to participate as an equal member was really hard in terms of like how we show up. And so he had to obviously support me more, which was great, but also challenging because he was grieving, and challenging because he was trying to keep the family financially afloat with, you know, gas prices going crazy. And it was a lot on him, as well as obviously a gestating human as myself. So it was a very kind of stressful pregnancy from that standpoint. But I mean, there were also interesting moments of healing. We went back to where his father lives for what was supposed to be a family reunion that he had organized, that Ted's father had organized, and it ended up being a family memorial for him, where family members from far away had all flown in for this family reunion. So that was pretty meaningful. And to be there with everyone saying, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna have another baby. That's so exciting." And you know, what names are you gonna take? Is there a family name you're taking? So um that was pretty special in its own right. And then there's also something about it being my third pregnancy and different women coming up to me and saying, you know, I've been thinking about also having a third. Like, I'm on the fence because we're kind of at capacity. How's this been for you? How'd you make the choice? What kind of pushed you over? Because at least here in the US, I think my age group and like our where we are in life, a lot of people are at that place where they're straddling the do we jump into number three land? Because that's a different place from where number two is. It was surprising. I would say 15 or more different people throughout my pregnancy came up to have this conversation of what pushed you over to three? Because I'm thinking about it too. And what's also besides people having this fear of like number three is going to decimate their relationship or their life or their career, there's also this fear of like what pregnancy and birth is going to bring, the uncertainties of that, especially as we're getting older, or if they've had traumatic births. It just creates like, oh my gosh, am I opening the door for, will I be totally incapacitated by this pregnancy, either during it or after? What's going to happen? What's the consequence of having this? So there's a lot of fear around pregnancy and birth. And maybe that's a little bit highlighted when the world is also kind of going crazy as well. And it's also interesting because being born in the years that we were, so my husband was born in 84 and I was born in 85, I feel like we're both straddling like a cultural shift in how men show up in a relationship, the generation right before us, and the generation right after us. So even looking at my younger brother, who's 5 years younger, he's so conscientious about women, really just, oh, you're, you know, a birth goddess, like that type of more egalitarian view for sure. And then also more curiosity about the gender spectrum and how that plays into familial roles and what is a family and what's a family role, like being more curious about these things. Whereas, you know, 1984 and previous, it's kind of just like, here are your roles, go and do them. So that's interesting. And Ted, having not had a strong relationship with his father, is becoming a father without having had really like too much of an idea of what that looks like in the day to day. He, of course, has memories, beautiful memories with his father, but not a father that like lives in the home with his mom and treats his mom in a certain way. And balancing familial tasks together. He never saw that. So he's kind of etching a path for himself by himself. So that's also interesting to watch him kind of go through that and straddle that. Because he also has friends who are definitely, 1982, 1981, different mentality. And he can associate with them. And then also his friend who was born in 87, who's like way more like, oh my gosh, we're gonna, of course, do everything together, So it's interesting to see him socially balance those different roles as well. So yeah, we went through this kind of interesting pregnancy where each of us showed up in new ways. I didn't know how strong I could be. I thought for sure, there's a limit and there is not one. But then I also was able to discover rest, meaning like it's okay. Resting is a thing to do. It's not a not doing. Resting is an action and an action that bears fruit. We usually think of like doing things as like writing, reading, cleaning, building, planting, all this stuff, and that those things bear fruit. And oh my gosh, what a paradigm shift. Rest bears fruit as well. And so I allowed myself to rest in new ways that I hadn't in my whole life, but in particular since becoming a mother. And Ted allowed himself to show up in ways and to hear my voice and listen to it and give value and credence to it in a way that he hadn't before, which was really cool to see. I went back to my home birth midwife that I had for my second birth, and there were no questions asked about that. There was no convincing that had to be done. It was just like, yeah, of course, I know you're going to do this. And yes, it's a financial consideration, and I don't see us doing anything different, right? So that was great. I had a lot of anxiety just being, I don't know why, that this whole propaganda about being an older mom means whatever in terms of our health outcomes, because I was absolutely fine for the whole pregnancy, besides experiencing the hernia and the associated pain and feeling more tired. The more tired and even the hernia, all of that could be because I had two other children I was running after and might have nothing to do with my age. And the whole time when I was doubting, like, oh, am I not going to be able to have a home birth because X or Y or Z? My husband said, you're going to have your home birth. Just, I know you are. You need to know that you are. You're going to be fine. Stop worrying. So that was something that was echoed between my midwife and Ted just over and over of, do you not want to have this home birth? Because there's no reason for you to feel that you're not going to be able to. So that was cool to see that he was an advocate in that way. And my midwife, of course, she was part therapist, part herbalist, she just showed up in all the ways. But the most important way was to remind me that I am able to do this through all the different doubts, through all the different experiences. She just kept coming back to, you are able to do this. You are going to do this. I am here to usher you and be next to you through this, but I just need you to start believing. So that was amazing. Also, she knew me well. She knew Ted well, so she could call us on our BS really easily, which was that I think the best part of having a birth worker who has been through birth with you before. That was amazing. I did right before I got pregnant. My A1C was pretty high, so I was in the pre-diabetes category. And so, of course, my first thought was, crap, like I'm not going to be able to give birth because I'm going to develop gestational diabetes and all of this. And that didn't end up being the case, but definitely had a few weeks. So my midwife does the testing for gestational diabetes a little differently. She gives you the kit, the diabetes kit. And for a week, she has me test my own blood using the kit after certain meals or when I first wake up in the morning. And then I record those values. And based on those, we decide whether we have to do a different type of a test. So I learned so much in that week about what I eat and what it does to my blood sugar. even what I eat at night before I go to bed, what that does to my fasting, things that I had no idea about. So aside from being a little obsessive compulsive about that for 2 weeks, it was just a really good learning experience of what I can take with me past the pregnancy. Yeah. So that was another gift from my pregnancy of I became way more conscious of my diet. And then, so I passed that. We thought about whether I was going to do GBS and all of that stuff. And I think in the end, again, Natalie was telling me, you're not going to be GBS positive, and even if you are, we have choices. You don't have to immediately decide we're going to do antibiotics. Like, let's look at the research behind what the actual consequences of something like this are. So you'll always have a choice with me, is what she was telling me. And then, yeah, so we got towards the end of the pregnancy, all the different stressors aside, and I started having prodromal labor. Well, there were a couple of times when I started having like more like labor pains, and I was only 35 weeks pregnant. But I had traveled on an airplane somewhere, so it was like I had done things that my body was probably saying, could you stop? Like, could we just rest right now? So each of those times turned out to be okay. There was this one day when I went to the bathroom and I thought I was finished peeing, but I clearly wasn't because a lot of water continued coming. And I called my midwife about it and she said, well, you should go check that out. Just make sure, your waters haven't broken. So, because I was out of town, I was in Texas at that time. And I went into this whole like spiral of, I really don't want to give birth in Texas. I don't want to give birth in a hospital. I don't want to give birth at 35 weeks. This is the worst. How could this happen? So I went to the hospital, just flooded with tears. And I said, you guys better not make my waters break just in the attempt to check if they've broken. Just so upset. And they said, we promise the things that we do are not going to cause your water to break. We're just going to monitor and make sure everything is okay. So they did that. My waters had not broken. But then we had another, we came back home and my mother's dog passed away. Just again, like another brush with death and another thing for my children to kind of negotiate. Like, what does this mean? This is a dog that we've loved and now this dog is gone and all of that. So that was just another strange hardship that came up during this pregnancy. But then we came back and so around 37 weeks, once I had the green light, I felt like my body was just, okay, cool. So let's start preparing. So it spent the next 2.5 weeks just preparing. It felt like everything was just kind of pulsing and squeezing and tightening. It was an interesting couple of weeks of like touch and go almost. Is it now? Is it coming? Is it this? But I think that had happened with my second pregnancy too, of I started having prodromal labor pretty like regularly for the 2 weeks prior. There was one thing that I really, really wanted to make sure that we go to, and it was a silly thing, but it was this band that my husband and I really like, and we follow them around and we like to hear their music. They were coming to play with the Colorado Symphony just a few days before my due date. So it was November 15th was the concert, and my due date was, I think, the 22nd. Yeah, it was the 22nd. So it was kind of like, that's ambitious. But we made it. We made it to that concert. I remember how many comments, because everyone likes to comment to a pregnant lady, right? How many comments I got of like, wow, you look like you could give birth to, are you having contractions? Just for the whole concert, which was really silly. But we did the concert and I loved it. I was so tired and I came home and the next day I was down and out for the count. I couldn't get out of bed no matter what I did. I just spent the whole day in bed, which is unlike me. And I was noticing this, like, okay, I wonder what this is about. Am I sick? Is like, what's going on? And my husband just knew. Like normally my husband would be like, could you like the kids, like they're screaming, they're this. Didn't even touch me that whole day, just left me in bed, which was really interesting. And then dinner time came. He made dinner. He got the kids ready. He put them to bed. And I kept saying, "Oh, do you want me to, should I?" And he said, "Nope, like you're good. I'm gonna do these things." And then I noticed that like my consciousness was like slipping in an interesting way. Like I was just kind of going um, into these other places for periods of time. Like I was just kind of disconnecting, which had been happening, honestly, like for the last 2 months of pregnancy. There would be kind of this like slip from the regular stream of consciousness, and I would kind of go elsewhere in a way. And I knew that that was kind of prep, right? Like labor land prep in a way, but it was happening much more. I was more like disconnected from things around me. And Ted, I noticed, started vacuuming the carpet and washing all the dishes. And I was like, "What are you up to?" He's like, I think you're in labor." And I said, "I don't think I'm in labor." He said, "Okay, love, just, do your thing. I'm gonna do this. Don't worry about anything." So yeah, he starts vacuuming the carpet. He puts down the drop cloth on the carpet and all of this. And I'm like, Ted, you might be wasting your time. I don't think I'm in labor. And he's like, "Okay, okay, that's you. Like, that's fine that you feel that." So he was tracking me more closely than I was tracking. And I overheard him in a couple of conversations with friends saying, "Yeah, I think it's going to be tonight." And I was like, "It's not." But he was, and I don't know, this is the third pregnancy. And I hear it on your podcast a lot where some of us have denial when we're going into labor. And I don't know, is it our fear or is it, oh, I don't want to like anticipate meeting my baby and I'm not going to meet him yet or something. But it was such a strong denial. And I even had that metacognition. I was like, no, I listened to this on Anna. All the women have denial. Am I going into denial? I'm not going into denial. This isn't labor. Just this kind of talking to myself. But he, I guess, fourth time's the charm, saw all the signs. He says, "Babe, you're putting your hands on the wall and swaying your hips." I'm pretty sure that means you're in labor. So he was, but it was just so meaningful to me because he did all the things. He prepared the labor aid. He started getting food ready for the people who were going to come to help me with birth. Like he just wordlessly knew exactly what to do and was just doing it and wasn't frustrated with it or any, like he just showed up. And that's what I mean. This is a new stage in our marriage where he's showing up in these ways. And it was a special gift that having this last pregnancy brought with it, of me letting my body do its thing and him respecting that I'm letting my body do its thing. So around 8 p.m., I think we called my midwife finally. And it was interesting because I was having such a hard time articulating myself. So she was saying, "So like, tell me what's going on." And Ted's like, "She's in labor." And she said, "Okay, well, tell me what are the signs?" And I said, "Well, I've been tracking my contractions," which she could see. She has an app, a midwifery app that she can see me when I'm tracking my contractions. She said, "I could see you've been tracking contractions all day." I said, "Yeah, but do you see they're not consistent. They're not going anywhere. They're just kind of one's 4 minutes, the other's 11." She said, "Yeah, yeah, you can stop tracking them, by the way." That's what she said. So you are, it seems, in labor, and it could happen tonight or it could not. Either way, you're having contractions. So you could stop tracking. And I remember telling her, "Yeah, but it's like anchoring me to do it. So I'm going to keep doing." She's like, "Cool." She said, let's just wait and see." I spoke to her again around 9:30, about an hour and a half later. And she's like, "So what's going on?" And at this point, I was just like, I don't know. And so she said, "Okay, I think we're having a baby tonight." And I think it's because I couldn't talk. And she said, "I'm going to bed now because I'm going to try to get as much sleep as I can because I think I'm probably going to see you later tonight." And I was like, "I mean, I don't think so, but sounds good." So she went to bed. And I, trying to prove everyone wrong, got up and started doing dishes. And I remember, I think I did like 3 dishes. And then in the third one, I noticed that I needed to rest between I had to stop for the contraction and then I needed to rest between the contractions, which I was like, oh, okay. Like we're in a different stage, which is so interesting because, I was having the sensation, right? And the sensation's intense, but it wasn't like it felt like I could still do dishes. And it wasn't until I realized that my body was needing rest from the contraction, not from the pain, but from the intensity of it. So this time it was different in that the pain and the intensity of contractions were separate from one another. So that was really unique. So I put down the dishes and I decided to set up like my little kind of labor area in the living room. So I brought like a pillow to put my knees on so that I can kind of just stretch my torso and arms over the couch. And I was just there for, like several, so that would have been around 9:30 when we talked to her. And then around 10, I couldn't wash the dishes anymore, 10:15. So I sat on the couch around 10:15, 10:20, or kneeled next to the couch around that time. And the kids were already asleep. Ted was buzzing around. Like I kept imagining him in my head because my eyes were closed the majority of the time, like a bee just kind of buzzing around the house. And he had this energy of just like, he was so focused and so determined and so clear on everything that he was doing. And I was just listening to the comforting sounds of him running around. And then he like changed the lighting and he turned on our TV, which at first I was like, what are you doing? I don't want this right now. But he remembered that in my birth to our first son, I was watching a video of jellyfish moving across the screen set to classical music. So he knew that I needed something like nature connected that also had like calming music. So he found something, YouTube or Spotify, something like this that had that it was like nature scenes with classical music or meditation music. And he put it on. So at first I was like irritated that he did it, but then I realized it was really nice and it created a nice lighting in the room because he turned off the other lights. He lit the 500 candles that I asked him to purchase when I was preparing for birth. He just went around and there were probably like 10 candles in the living room. And then he would come, do you want me to put one in the bathroom? Do you want to labor in the bathroom? Like it was so sweet how he did all of that. So, and yes, the time just went by. And then I remember probably around 11:30, I started saying counter pressure. I'm going to need some counter pressure. So he would buzz around and then I would say, Ted, counter pressure. And he would come and he started pressing. So that's again, like the pain was kind of static, but the intensity was rising, which was so interesting because what I reflected on afterwards was I didn't vocalize, like I wasn't shouting or moaning very much or even making kind of the kind of sounds. I was silent because I was feeling the intensity instead inside, which was really, I don't know why last time I used the mantra and that was the way that my voice was coming out during the sensation of the waves. And this time, for some reason, I felt the need to let the waves rise inside of me. And yeah, just kind of notice the intensity that was happening. It was a very different labor. And we all kind of reflected on it afterwards of like, hey, Shiva, like, why didn't you let it, why didn't it come out in voice? Because it was coming out in, I guess, other ways. But so, yeah, so he was coming probably every 2-3 minutes, the poor guy, to like give me counter pressure, which was really incredible just in the midst of everything else that he was doing. And then I was tracking the contractions throughout the day. And so when I reached this point, I obviously wasn't able to track the contractions, nor did I need to, but I started doing this number thing in my head where I figured out that when a contraction started, I start counting backwards from 35. And then by the time I get to 20 or 19, that would be the, oh, like, yes, I need to really let my shoulders down, is what I noticed. I have to put my shoulders down and I have to breathe, because by 11, the wave would be dissipating. It would be kind of coming back down. So I had this thing that I did for each wave of like noticing like at what number, okay, I'm at 21, I'm almost there, 20, 19, okay, this is it. And kind of noticing, don't let your shoulders come up at 20. And if I let my shoulders down, the pain would be less, but the intensity would still be there. So it was something about releasing my shoulders allowed for the pain to be less, but the wave was still able to come through me as it needed to. So it was a very interesting, and maybe that's why I was so internal. I was so like focused on the sensation that there wasn't room or time or energy left to let something out through my throat, which was very interesting. Just like a different from the first two for sure. So then around, what time would it have been? Around 1:30, Ted said, I think we should call Natalie. So, and I can't talk. Like there's just, so we call Natalie and she's like, okay, so tell me what's happening. And I think I was pretty much like something like that, because I couldn't, it's so funny. I had the intention to speak, but there was no follow through on the like motor aspect of it. It was all just, so then Ted took the phone because I was saying, I don't know, is what I kept saying. And then Ted took the phone and he started describing what he was seeing, but I don't remember anything that he said to her. Just that the conclusion was Natalie said on the speakerphone, okay, Shiva, I'm getting ready to come. And she had a student who actually provided most of my care throughout the pregnancy. And so she and Abby, who was her student, she said, I'm going to call Abby and we're going to head over. Now, or I think maybe Abby was on the phone call with us on the conference. So she said, yeah, we're going to pack up and we'll see you there soon. So they were at the house actually at 1:30. They got in and it was actually really, I don't know who did, if it was Ted or Natalie, but someone put a flashlight into the birth pool, and it like all the lights were off in the house except the TV was on behind me, so it was like casting a light into the room, and then the tub was just like illuminating this blue. It was so pretty, and it wasn't until, I hear some people that they get fairy lights and then their candles do this whole thing, and I always want to do something like that, but never have had the time to think or design that for myself. But it naturally happened just because someone put a flashlight like next to this birthing pool, and it just became this, it looked like a bioluminescent orb in our living room. It was just really beautiful. So yeah, the pool was ready, and then I think Natalie had him fill it because she was pretty sure that things would be moved along enough by the time she got there. So she got there, and I didn't spend very much more time on the floor. She didn't check me because obviously, like, there's no reason to at that point. And she just kind of set everything up quietly. And then Ted loves to talk about how when she arrived, she was just like, okay, I need coffee. And our son had recently broken our French press, and our other way of making coffee had also been broken by another child a few months prior. So we had really no way of making coffee, but he created a coffee making mechanism and came to give me counter pressure and went to like prepare more labor aid. He was just, I don't know, he said it's the busiest I've ever been in my entire life. Just running around, making sure everybody's needs were met. And Natalie she's amazing and unapologetic and just like, this is what I need and I need you to do it now. And I know you can do it. She empowers people by having unfaltering faith that they can do it. So even if you don't, she's like, obviously you're going to do this right now. So between how she encouraged me and then how she empowered Ted to just be like this Herculean task of, and the counter pressure is harder now. Like it's getting tougher and tougher because it's getting more intense. So it's physically taxing for him, and he's running around doing these other things. It was incredible to see him doing this. So then, soon after she arrived, she said, "I think maybe it's time for you to get in the tub. What do you think about getting into the tub?" And I was like, "Yeah," because the pain was starting to. I had to do a lot more effort to get my shoulders down, which was still my main coping, was getting my shoulders down because it would release the tension, and when my body wasn't tense, the pain got out of the way and I could focus on the intensity instead. So, but it was getting harder to do that. So, I got into the pool, and there's always that like initial feeling of going into the pool. The warm water just kind of defrosts you in a way, like takes that tension out of your muscles a little bit. Um, but I was pretty far along, I think. So, there was a moment of and then there was like, okay, back to work. So they had some cold towels that they were putting on my neck, which was really wonderful because I was already in it. But I remember the main frustration that came out at this point was, I am so mad that this is happening at night because I wanted it to happen in the morning after I had slept so that I have energy for this, because I know I'm going to be so stinking tired when I'm trying to push and I haven't slept at all. So I was just like so irritated, and I said it over and over, and Natalie kept saying, "It is what it is, girl. Like you're in this. You just like accept that this is happening." Because I would say like, I'm just so tired and I don't want this to happen right now. But I forgot, that's probably why my body rested that whole Sunday, that whole day. But so yeah, I was just struggling with this mentally of like, I'm gonna be so tired, even though ironically I was already doing the work ostensibly, but I was stuck in this frustrated headspace. I think it was like residual from my first birth, where similarly the labor had started at night, and then but it lasted way longer. So around 6 or 7, I had lost steam and had trouble pushing, so it lasted way longer because I was so tired. So I was scared that that was going to happen again. Meanwhile, it's only 2 in the morning. It's not that far along. But so yeah, they're putting the towels on. And what was so interesting is, so I'm in the pool and they're sitting in the small couch in front of me, the two of them. And then occasionally Abby is coming up and she's, checking the heart rate, and sometimes my vitals. And I remember being like, could you like do more? Like, could you help me more? And what I was noticing is that she didn't need to, and she was showing me like, you have this. There's nothing more that I can or need to do. Like, I don't need to come there and make you feel like this is a situation to panic in. I don't need to kind of like, make you feel like this is so hard, and you're doing it. You just need to believe. So that was really nice. That in the moment, it was a little frustrating, but looking back on it, I realized how, again, she was empowering me from a distance, kind of like calling my power forth with her, taking that step back, which is nice compared to, I guess, other settings where they're over involved and they give you the narrative that you can't do this, that this is so hard, that you need all of this support. And that's just not the model in home birthing. So then there was, okay, and then the boys started waking up. So the two of them. So Ted would have to alternate between counter pressure, and then the boys are waking up. So around 2:30 or 2:15, the boys woke up and they said, "We just want to see Mama," because they knew I was going into labor because Ted told them. So they said, "We just want to see Mama. We just want to give her a hug and a kiss." So they came out into the living room. And they gave me a hug and a kiss, and then Ted brought them back in after a few minutes of hanging out. And then I started to feel pushy. I mean, there were times I felt pushy earlier, but this one was more like marked that I felt pushy. And so I told Natalie, I was like, I'm starting to feel way more pushy right now. And she's like, okay, cool, let's see what happens. And somehow she had the mirror already in the pool at that time. You guys just know these things, I guess. But it was already like right there. And so and one of my goals for this pregnancy was that I wasn't going to shy away from the mirror. I was going to look, I was going to feel his head because usually last time she said, "Do you want to see? Do you want to feel his head?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." But this time I wanted to be part of it in that way and not be fearful of it or squeamish about it. So she already had the mirror there, and when she said, "Okay, go ahead, give it a push," I pushed and I saw in the mirror my bag of waters come out. Like psst, it looked like my vagina was blowing a bubble with bubble gum. And it was so funny. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean now? And she said, okay, probably that his head is pretty close. Do you mind if I feel where his head is? So she just felt and she was like, oh, okay, that's the next contraction. So she said, do you want me to bring Ted? And I said, again, like words totally not working. So I couldn't answer. And then I was like feeling another thing coming on. And so then I pushed again and his head came out with the second one. And she said, I feel like Ted should be here. And again, I can't answer her for some reason. But his head is officially out at this point. And then the craziest part was that feeling when they're turning it does feel like someone's touching you, right? Like I didn't understand, like I thought that it was going to feel like a turning, but instead it feels like someone's touching you. And I was like, who's touching me? And then I realized that I was doing the thing that others do. And no, that touching feeling is the baby is turning his head around. So at that point, when I realized, when I put it together that he was turning, then I said, Ted, the baby's coming, his head is out. So then Ted runs out of their room. Kind of, I don't know if you've seen Seinfeld, but like when Kramer walks into a room and kind of slides in when he opens the door, Ted like slides into the room and he's like, what do you want me to do? The kids are not asleep yet. And I was like, bring them out. And he did this. And then he was like, okay. And he runs in and he brings the kids out. And at this point, like I changed positions to like a different part of the pool, and his head is out. And Natalie's saying his head's been out. It's getting close. It's almost 3 minutes now that his head's been out. Are you not feeling a contraction to push? And I was like, like I haven't felt a contraction to push. And she's like, well, I need you to maybe try to push anyway, because it's been a bit that his head is out. So then I pushed and he came out. So that was it. It was bag of waters, the head, and then when I started pushing, when Natalie told me to push, then a contraction started. So I don't know why it stalled in that moment, but once I actually pushed, then the contraction also pushed and baby came out. And I had all these plans to like catch him and raise him like Lion King, that whole thing. And at that point, I really didn't care anymore. So I think Abby caught him and then I got him in my hands and we got him out of the water. But so the boys were in the room for when he came earthside, that was all I had wanted. Like I just wanted them to witness some part of it. They don't remember that part, but I do, that they were there for that. So that was pretty amazing. So yeah, that's how baby came out. There was this interesting right before he came out, like in those 3 minutes when I was negotiating with like why the contraction wasn't coming, I started feeling fearful of the mirror. I was like, the baby's gonna fall on the mirror and it's gonna cut the baby, like this strange fixation. I was like, could you move the mirror out of the way? And Natalie was like, the mirror's not going to cut the baby, but okay. So I don't know. There was that strange paranoia, like labor brain, where I just suddenly became really frightened. I must have just been frightened of pushing, but obviously everything was fine. And I did this time hold the top of my vagina just for extra support during pushing him out. I don't know why I was so worried about that, but I did that, and it was cool because it did help me be more involved in the actual process of pushing him out rather than kind of being fearful of that. I was holding myself, so I felt his body kind of come through, which was really nice. And yeah, and then he was here. Um, and we held him, and it just happened so fast. It was like, yeah. And there wasn't any bleeding, which was really also interesting. Like the color of the water, it was so much vernix. He had so much vernix on him, and it was like all over the pool. He was just like covered, which was really sweet. But he was 39 and 2. So I mean, who knows if he was really 39 and 2, but I was just surprised by how much vernix there was there. Um, and then we were kind of hanging out. The boys were like touching him and hugging and kissing, and they were all really excited. And then I want to try to remember how many minutes had passed before they were kind of, yeah, this was the interesting part about having a student there, in that I think after 20 or so minutes, she was like, "Hey, do you mind if I kind of like do a little tug on your cord just to see what's happening with your placenta?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I could feel her tugging at it, and I was like, "Yeah, it's not really, doesn't feel like it's ready yet." So then I think as we were getting closer to half an hour, then I said, let's just do herbs. Let's get the herbs. So she had some tincture that I took, and she did that last time too, where she gave me a tincture, and then maybe 2, 3 minutes later, the placenta came out. But she had pulled on it, which was like an experience I hadn't had before, of someone like pulling at the cord and me feeling it attached still inside. So that was kind of like a different feeling. But yeah, as soon as I took the herbs, I felt contractions, and then I pushed and everything came out. And there wasn't any bleeding, and that was unusual. So that felt nice. And then and then eventually, I got out of the water, and we all snuggled on the couch for a while, and the boys had to. That I think they were wondering, should we go back into bed? Yeah, because then from there we went to my bed, and then the boys had gone to sleep because my son had school the next day and he was doing a presentation, so he needed to go to bed. But yeah, then we were in bed, and about two. So he was born at 3:01, and the midwives were at our house probably until just before 7. So just between 6 and 7, they weighed the baby, and checked in on bleeding and all of this. And then I was falling asleep during that last part. Like we were just so done. So the midwives were gone by 7, and I was asleep by 7 that morning with the baby. Um, and it was, yeah, just so easy. It was the fastest labor. So for, I think, active labor, probably from 10 until 3, and he was out. Just had kind of like quiet labor from 5 to 10 that previous evening. But yeah, for actively it was 10 until 3, it seems. Yeah.
I love how your husband stepped into like midwifing you that evening, like how he did that. I love hearing these stories of men doing this, and just and I've witnessed some men be the most amazing kind of birth support and like man midwife really to their women, and there's something so touching about that, and so beautiful how witnessing the woman you love go into labor and birth, and how that softens them and opens them, and like the devotion and yeah, just the beautiful presence. So I loved hearing that about him.
Yeah, definitely. It was so wonderful to see that. And there were moments of stress for sure.
Yeah,
But
sure.
yeah. But it was, yeah, like there would be times when I'd be like, I need the counter pressure. And he's like, but the kids are awake, or, something. I remember for one contraction, Abby did the counter pressure, and I was like, nope, this isn't, Ted, and it was nice to need him in that way, like there are a lot of times when I have an argument or a fight with him, I'll be like, I don't need anything from you. And it was so interesting to be like, no, I really, you're the only one I want right now. You're the one that I need. You're the only one who does it right. There's no one else. So, it's very vulnerable to feel that way. I can't think of a more vulnerable moment than being in labor, but it's also really good for a marriage to see yourself wanting and needing that support from that person. And more importantly, like him being able to provide that and showing up tenderly in that setting. So that was really, I think, healing for us in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And being reminded of, a woman's power, his wife's power, absolute, divine power of, birthing new life onto this earth. Like that must be so also so awe-inspiring and amazing to witness.
Yeah. 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 And he's also just, now that he's seen me go through this and go through the appendicitis and all of this, he's like, you have an incredible pain tolerance. So if you are saying something hurts, I believe you. So it's somehow, yeah, he has like some appreciation and some admiration for the way that I hold myself in certain ways. And it's nice to feel that way. It's nice that my husband has appreciation for me because of what he's seen me be able to do. There aren't many areas of my life where I feel that way, where I'm like proud of the way that I did something. But I can be proud of this part of it for myself, which I'm grateful I have that for myself in a way. Um, so that was really nice. And then yeah, and then just blissing out with the baby, and oh my gosh, now we've got four, which was amazing. But also a lot. Yeah, because immediately it's like, okay, well, now Zach has to go to school, so he has to get up and get him ready. And then the younger one needs to have something to eat, and he's going to stay with me while I'm alone with the baby for the first time. And how's that going to be? Just now there are new logistics involved. And that shift is, it doesn't wait for you to feel better. It's just you have to do it. So that's been an interesting that was interesting to have to jump into that immediately after,
Yeah.
because it was just the two of us. Yeah.
I did have a little pause in the beginning of your story because the way you said that this was potentially your last one, like there was an opening in how you worded that. Is there an opening
Yeah.
for a fifth?
Not for my husband. I think for me, if we were younger and if the ifs, like if we didn't have any financial insecurity, if we had family that lived near us. We don't have any family that lives near us at all.
Yeah.
If those ifs were met, oh, I'd for sure have a fifth, like no doubt about it. And I would love whether it was another boy or another girl, it doesn't matter. Yeah, definitely. And we talk about it, because we met in our mid-30s and it was a second marriage for both of us. And we always say, if next life, like, let's just do this 10 years earlier. And then we can have 5 kids if we want to. Because he said, I would have another child with you. It's just now I don't know the how of it. And I agree with that. It's, I've had to take a break from my career, which is great. And I love that. And I won't get this time with my children back. And I'll have my 50s, 60s, 70s, all of that to work my ass off if I want to. But I won't have this. So I'm fine with taking a break. And it is, I am trying to create a certain type of a childhood for them where they can see our family overseas, and they're not seeing our family overseas on a single income. Like that's just not going to happen with this number of kids. So, yeah, there are that bittersweet, like, I wish I didn't have to consider that and I could just have another child, but that's not going to happen. I also, maybe it's my superstition, but I never, about life and death, I never like to speak um, with finality, you know? And so I think that's probably why I spoke that way, because I'm not the one who decides these things and I don't ever want to be. So, yeah, about life and death, may there always be an opening, is how I try to see it.
Beautiful. I love that.
Uh,
Love that. So, if you had a first time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
So I think the most important part of this is the rest thing that I was talking about. We'll kind of go into what I think is the most important. My the birth didn't end when I gave birth to him. I would say that the fourth trimester is also the last stage of labor. I learned from my first two births that one needs to prepare for postpartum, maybe more than they prepare for the birth.
Yeah.
And your ability to do that and your focus on that is truly what's going to guarantee like everything that comes after, including your physical health when you're 85, including the emotional adjustment of your children when they're 25, like whatever, all of it, I think is so heavily hinged on postpartum. And outside of you, I don't know people who talk about the importance of that emphasis. So the real kind of the birthing process happened in the way that I curated my postpartum. I saved for my postpartum. I made an investment. I got like a postpartum Mind abdominal massage package, like 6 massages at home for 3 hours. I invested in a postpartum doula for that first month. I invested in somebody who could clean the house, and I pressured Ted's mom to stay here as long as she could and to come back as often as she could. In fact, I think I even kind of planned the pregnancy around, okay, well, if I give birth around the holidays, there's a greater likelihood that people will come to help. So I really, really focused on curating that. And that was the saving grace for all of this. Even walking into birth with a little bit more confidence, knowing that I have a net that's going to catch me on the other side of this. So I met with this postpartum doula who miraculously just happened to have studied the same type of yoga that I studied. And her husband's a therapist, and she has like a very therapeutic mindset. And she, she had a home birth with one of the home birth midwives in the Denver area who I had interviewed in my own process. Like she just aligned in a way that only the universe can align you with somebody, you know? So I met with her and while I was pregnant and kind of expressed very openly, very clearly, like what my concerns were, what my fears were about my postpartum period, what type of support I was going to need. She uses the book The Fourth Trimester. Is that the book that it's called? I have it, but I forget the name. But it has recipes that are based like on Chinese medicine for postpartum. She uses that as her recipe book, and she brings like 6 meals with her each time she comes, 6 meals worth of food. And then she spends, the 4 hours like giving you a massage or folding your laundry or helping you take care of your other kids or listening to your birth story, processing your birth story, processing your postpartum feelings. Like, that sounds a little bit like, maybe we want to work on your mood. Like, what can we do to support this? Just she was incredible. She came 4 times to my house. So I spent a total of 16 hours with her. But the life giving that she gave me, I mean, 16 hour, I can't believe what she did in that time frame in terms of healing for me. So that was, I remember my girlfriends were like, do you want to have a doula fund? Do you want to have a sibling doula? Like, what do you want to do? And I was like, forget about the birth. The birth is going to be fine. I need this care for afterwards. And that was, oh my gosh, it was incredible. Yeah, Alexi was just like the bee's knees for me for that. And then, of course, the postpartum massage was more practice in saying, hey, I need to take care of myself right now. Please take my baby and please take care of the kids. Like I'm going to do this for myself because I deserve it. And it's not from a place of entitlement. It's a place of like, do you want me to be able to run around with the kids? Do you want me to be able to work? Do you want me to be able to mop the floors and, participate in all of this with you? Then I need this right now to do that. The way I kind of see it is like if you broke your leg, you wouldn't be trying to run a 5K, would you, with your cast on? And I think we are not socialized to view it that way. I went to a mother's group just last week, and there was a first-time mom there. And when they asked, what was the most surprising thing to you about postpartum? And she said, I didn't realize that I wouldn't bounce back. My sister was up and at 'em like 2 days post, and I just didn't feel like I could. And I said, great, like you shouldn't. It's give yourself at least those first 3 months, like to feel your strength back. Like I don't know I don't know who told us that it had to be this way, that you had to be. I know that some of it is circumstantial and that it's a huge privilege to be able to rest in that way. I really, really feel that. I've lived that. I know that it's a huge privilege to be able to rest. And I don't understand why people have dispensations after surgeries to, take time off from work. But there's no dispensation after birth. Like, I don't know, a surgery is a singular event. You just spent 10 months growing a human and then pushing them out of your body. And there's really no discussion about resting at all. They say, oh, don't exercise until 6 weeks postpartum. But that's really that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't talk about all the millions of other things you're going to do before that appointment and after that appointment. So I don't know. I think the most important thing for me in this journey of becoming a mom, these various times, really invest in your postpartum even more than you do in getting baby clothes, in what you're doing for birth. The birth will happen, and I hope for everybody that they have the right provider for ushering you through birth, because that's an incredible portal. And set yourself for success. Set yourself up for success for postpartum. That's more important than all of it, I think. Because it also plants the seeds for if you are in a relationship, your postpartum is really going to dictate what that relationship feels like post motherhood. If you feel abandoned, if you feel put upon and totally tapped out, because you didn't invest in your postpartum, you're probably going to hate your husband or your wife or whoever you're with, like whoever your partner is, because you're so tapped out. So it just helps all aspects of your life if you can focus on that. I think that's my first one in terms of a pearl of wisdom.
Yeah, it's a beautiful and very important pearl of wisdom that, as you say, we talk way too little about. I mean, I have two courses, the natural birth course and the nourishing postpartum course. And, 95% of women go for the natural birth course and 5% goes for the nourishing postpartum course, And
Yeah.
it's so sad because it's so deeply misunderstood. And it's not just rest. It's like it is multi-layered. And what you just shared about what that doula did for you, just providing you with the space to feel, to process, that is invaluable. But actually, like planning, not just winging, but just like birth, like don't wing your postpartum, at least for those first 40 days. It's a very new concept, this going back to work for women, well, essentially, especially in America, but different places around the world. I mean, the whole world is very masculine in a way of how we're supposed to show up for the workforce, for example.
and it's not made for women. But very much in the US, it's very much so, if you're going to be participating in the workforce, then you do it as a man. And oh, you had a baby, it doesn't count. If you're going to be here, like otherwise just go and be with your baby and don't. Whereas of course there's other countries that support motherhood and maternity care and leave. So it's very different around the world, but I very much understand where you're coming from living in the US and how there's and that pushes women to cross their boundaries and not actually look within what they need. And you need rest and you need to replenish. Like it takes so much out of you, the birth, the breastfeeding, actually even more so. Like you need so much nourishment on all levels, emotional, mental, physical, food wise, nutrition, all of it. So I'm so proud of you that you did that. And I think I hope this inspires other people. I got really inspired hearing it. I thought, wow, but also this should be every woman actually getting this kind of, postpartum treatment.
If possible, yeah. What was really interesting is it's the first time I didn't get mastitis. And my breasts were totally engorged. Like they were, I don't know, I've never seen them like that. And I kept asking my midwife, like, what am I going to do? And she said, if you're resting enough, you don't need to worry about it because it won't become mastitis if you're resting. It's when you don't that's what happens. Rest, hydrate, nurse him as much as you can. Don't pump to make it less because that's not going to make it less.
No, it increases it.
Yeah. She said, absolutely don't do any of that. Just if you're not pushing yourself, you're going to be just fine. And what was also interesting was like during this pregnancy, I felt like along with the hernia, I just felt this heaviness, and I was like, for sure, my vagina is going to prolapse. Like it just feels like everything's going to fall out at some point, and it felt like I would never not feel that way again. Just going to the bathroom to pee, I would come up from the toilet, and the heaviness, I'd be like, ooh, just it was awful. And it felt that way throughout the pregnancy and then probably the first 4 weeks afterwards. But just laying down, imagining my organs kind of going back to where they needed to go, and then doing this breathing exercise that Alexi, the postpartum doula, told me about. She was saying, what was it? Like, okay, inhale, expand your stomach out, and then on your exhale, imagine the visual of picking up a tissue with your fingers, that kind of pulling up when you're exhaling. And she said, and try to do that with a few of your breaths in your mind, kind of like you're inhaling nourishment, and on the exhale, pulling up your pelvic floor as if you were picking up a tissue off the floor. And that visualization, I mean, I feel better than I felt before I got pregnant. Just which is like I didn't think that was possible, but I didn't rest at all after my second son. So everything was a little wonky and painful that whole 3 years afterwards. So this was incredible. Just like laying down is an act in and of itself. It allows your body to reorganize. It allows for everything to kind of fall back into place. And then that little visualization, which just was everything in terms of bringing my pelvic floor back to where it needed to be. And it's still I mean, I'm only 4 months-ish out, so I'm still working through things, but yeah, I mean, I don't feel that heaviness anymore at all. The hemorrhoids are, for the most part, good to go. And if I have a hemorrhoid thing, it's usually my body being like, yeah, you need to rest. You didn't rest enough. So that was amazing. So please, like postpartum, rest postpartum, plan for postpartum. If you've got a budget for something, budget for that if you can. That's the first one. The other thing I would say is during labor, that whole pain, tension, anxiety, that cycle that happens, to really be mindful of what are you doing with your body. So if you're kind of doing this thing, everything hurts more. So the whole like letting my shoulders down, I couldn't do like a full body scan to release everything. But every time that I told myself to put my shoulders down, it kind of had a downward cascade. Everything else started to relax too. So during labor when things are kind of getting ahead of you, to remember to release as much tension physically. You will notice that your mind calms down. You will notice that your breathing expands. If you can just remind yourself, bring those shoulders down, bring the tension out. It just really helps you ride those waves in a better way. So I think that that's a really important one as well. And then the other one is to keep doing the thing that brought you to this podcast. If you've been doing investigations that brought you here, keep doing that for your pregnancy, to create for yourself the pregnancy and birth and postpartum that you want. Because there is a force out there that is working against us. I feel it. Like, it's just the force that laughs at women for being weaker, the force that says you need to bounce back, the force that says you need to get up and work as soon as you're done with all of this, the force that laughs about our ups and downs and things like that. There's a force out there, and you need to actively work against it. And if you're here and if you're listening to this, then you are doing that. You're challenging that force. Don't be afraid to dream about what you want pregnancy, birth, and motherhood to look like for you. Like, really allow yourself that privilege, because unfortunately in this world, it is a privilege for women to have that choice. So use it. If you have the opportunity, if you have access to this information, if you have access to communities, even if they're virtual, to tap into them and to create even a virtual tribe around you of people who vibrate in a similar way. The friends that I have all had at least one really traumatic birth experience. And that's because, I mean, maybe not because, it could be for lots of different reasons, but it was hard for me because I'm the only one that I know personally who's given birth at home and who believes that it's okay to give birth at home. And for a while, that was really frustrating to me. I was telling my midwife, like, where are the other women who do this? Why am I like the only one I know who's done this? And she said, well, you know me, you know Abby, you know your postpartum doula, you have the podcast that you listen to. So you have to kind of actively build that community for yourself. And some of it is going to be virtual, but it does feel better to come to your podcast and listen to other women that believe in this, and then curate for yourself what you want for yourself, because there's a force out there that doesn't want this for you, but you can still take it for yourself. So keep going on this path, keep dreaming, dare to dream of what you want it to look like, and you'll make it happen for yourself, hopefully. Medicine is important, and it's there to help us in those situations that we can't control. And we won't be able to control all the outcomes, but we can control our breath, we can control our thoughts about something, we can control what we surround ourselves with. And so to remember to keep doing that for yourself, that it's okay to want that and to do that for yourself. That was a lot. I'm not sure if that last one made as much sense, but that's what's been important to me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all your birthing wisdom and your extensive advice. I loved all of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. And I hope you expand this community, that we continue doing this. It's so important. And I love that this is available. And who knows, maybe I'll circle back in a different capacity one day and be part of it as well.
Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as The Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.